You ready? All right. So the first time that we did this joint event was in 2012. The year before, Doug, because Doug and I go back 25 years, at least.
More than 25 years.
Yeah,
really.
it probably
Almost
is.
30. Yeah,
All your books.
Yeah, but back to 1990. Well, I'm not sure. 1990, I think.
Whatever Cities of Gold published.
Yeah, that was 1991.
Okay, so it's been that long. I absolutely love Cities of Gold. If those of you who have never read it, you should take that opportunity. Anyway, Doug said to me must have been 2011, that he always had wanted to do one live event with Lincoln, but since Lincoln won't travel, he didn't think that would ever work out. And I had just been to the Arizona Kidney Foundation lunch because we were the bookseller, and we were at the Biltmore, and they had these jumbo screens with the authors on the screen. And I thought to myself, having absolutely no clue about how the technology would work. But see, if you want to be a real leader, you don't have to know how it works. You only have to know how it can be done. I mean, that it can be done. So I said to Doug, well, no problem. I said, we can Skype Lincoln in. We can put him on the big screen. We can live stream it back out again. And it'll be like a real event, right? Except without Lincoln in the room. And Doug said, can we really do that? Now at that point, this is Time Warner, which was like the media company, right? They had never thought of this. And here I am in Scottsdale, Arizona going, sure we can do it. So we went to the Biltmore, and it was, if you remember, a real undertaking. The team at the Biltmore was like, they really had to work hard. It cost Hachette something like $3,000 to do the technology because nobody knew how to do it. But it was their first #1 New York Times bestseller as a consequence of it. And people came from like Jamaica. Do you remember that? There was a whole group of people that flew
Amazing.
in.
I couldn't believe that people came from,
all over
the country.
But it was a Saturday. So, subsequently, we have done this performance, and Doug and Lincoln have now been #1 bestsellers 3 different times as a consequence. So it's been a very successful thing, thanks to all of you, and those of you who are watching who have bought books. And Doug has been here for 2 days signing books in the back room by the thousands, and we have a crew back there who are shipping them as we speak. And they're really great, aren't they? They're a crew.
They're fantastic. They are amazing. You hire excellent people.
Well, yes, it has been fun. Patrick, this has been our first event where we've brought in people that just to ship books, right?
Yep, that's right.
So it's been very impressive.
It's a sweatshop back there.
He isn't kidding. It really is a sweatshop. And I'm sure the fire marshal would have a heart attack if he were back there, but let's not tell him unless he's happening to watch this. Anyway, why don't we call Lincoln and we can get going?
All right. We'll move out
And
of the
thank
way,
you, by the way. Thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Hello?
Lincoln,
Yes.
you're there, but we're not on screen yet, so hang on a moment.
There's some kind of a difficulty on my end here.
Yeah, what have I done?
No, it's my problem. Just a sec.
There's usually a technical glitch. Right.
Is everybody there?
Yep, we're all here. We have a full house waiting for you.
So I'm holding you up?
No pressure.
Oh, well, okay. 3, 2, 1.
This is like the Great Oz, right? Yeah. Coming from... Oh, there you are! Yay!
I apologize. I just wanted to remind you of how empty your evening would have been only Doug there.
You mean you contrived your absence? Yes, of course you did.
Well, no. Would I do that?
Yes. So do you have your beverage on hand and your guitar in the background? And
Yeah, there's all sorts of instruments back there, and yeah, no martini tonight, alas. I'm in training.
okay.
What are you training for?
Yes, it is.
The bookstore.
So
I'm
here
in Florida with you.
we are for the second time with Asian Pendergast in Florida. If you recall in Verses of the Dead last year, he was down there, and happily he is still there when this truly sinister event occurs, which is shoes floating in the tide towards Sanibel and Captiva Island with human feet, severed human feet inside. That's so grim. Why'd you think that up?
Well, we didn't think that up. That was actually based on a true story. And how many of you have received our newsletter? So you've probably read about this, the real story behind this. But since 2007, 20 feet have washed up on the beaches of British Columbia and in Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. Sneakers with feet inside. And it's a huge mystery. Now they've investigated, and they think, oh, some of them might be suicide, some might be, fishermen who drowned, maybe a serial killer. Really, but they haven't really figured out exactly what's going on. But I read this story. I've been following this story actually for a couple of years and thinking, what the heck? This is so crazy. And then I suddenly thought, oh, wow, what a great first chapter this would be in a Pendergast novel. In Florida, these feet start washing up on the beach, and a beachcomber picks it up, and oh my God, there's a foot inside, and then Pendergast is called in. And so I called up Lincoln, and we worked out this wonderful first chapter. And then there was silence, and then Link said, well, what happens next? And I said, I have no idea. That's why I called you. And Lincoln said, well, I don't have any idea either. Well, we don't have a novel unless we can figure out who's doing this, why this is happening, who these people were, and why their feet are cut off. And so then I'm going to turn this over to Link so that he can tell you about the incredible discovery that he made.
Thank you. Doug is a fount of knowledge. Arcane trivia, such as the one he just mentioned to you. And, I was thinking to myself, why should we ruin a perfectly good beach by having all these feet wash up on it? But, it was a great idea. I mean, it made for a fantastic first chapter. Although I say who shouldn't. But if we weren't careful, we could have veered off into horror territory or mystery territory or just straight, I won't mention any names, but straight thriller territory.
Aliens. Oops, spoiler.
Yeah, right. The Adidas identity. But we decided we wanted to have some kind of huge twist near the end of the book. I'm not spoiling anything by saying this, because it's really annoying that we have people reading our books, and from chapter 1, their antennae are up, trying to find the bad guy. Oh, here he is. And, it makes us try and rise to the occasion to not only hide the bad guy, but particularly hide what he or she is doing. And just as Doug reads a lot about very far away exotic places, I find myself as a hypochondriac reading about all these diseases that I think I might have or may get in the near future. And particularly psychological diseases.
Which is strange, Link, because you're so completely normal.
I know. And I don't know if I can or should, but I better not. But it's amazing the names of some of these bizarre psychological disorders. Anyway, I found this one, and I was kind of like Doug reading about the feet. I was like, no, this can't be possible. It didn't have to be a joke. But it wasn't a joke. But it was, at the time that I read it, the condition, the syndrome was so rare, it didn't really have a name. But that didn't stop us from weaponizing it, so to speak, and putting it played it in our book, and I think Doug and I are safe in defying anybody to guess for at least 3 chapters what that twist is.
So, Lincoln, I have a question that I asked Doug earlier. Do you think in a thriller you actually have to start or have a murder? Or can a thriller depend upon other circumstances, other events?
Let me ask you a variant of that question. Would it be okay if a murder took place before the book began, or would there be no murder at all?
Well, I don't know that there is a rule. I mean, I was asking it out of curiosity. Doug made a very nice distinction between a murder and deaths. You know, people dying in a thriller, but not because they were intentionally murdered, but just because people die, you know, when high action is going on. Right, Doug?
That's right. I mean, I think the key is that there's a threat. You have to feel threatened. You know, the greatest stories of all time are about threat. You know, Beowulf, Hamlet, King Lear. I mean, you know.
I was thinking back to, you know, some of the thrillers I remember reading when I was young, like King Solomon's Mines, although I think I remember the movie way better than the book, or Scaramouche or something, you know, that were real adventure stories, kind of Errol Flynn kinds of stories, but there wasn't like a murder investigation that was part of it. So I don't know, audience, you can think about it, you know, would you be interested in a book, you know, a thriller where people die, they die, but there's no actual murder investigation? Which seems to me
I think Doug is right. If you can provide enough threat, if you can generate enough of a atmosphere, I mean, I'm thinking back on the various Hitchcock movies, and I can't think of a damn one that doesn't have at least one death in it. But look at Rear Window, you know, where you don't see anything happen, and the threat that is, you know, generated throughout the story is simply between the characters looking out the window, and there's a massive amount of threat generated by that. And, you know, that person doesn't have to die, but I think about that as an example. You know, Rear Window. What if Jimmy Stewart was wrong the whole time through and nothing had happened? Is that a real thriller? You know, we faced a decision like that near the end of this book. You know, something awful was about to happen, and we had to ask ourselves, should we actually do this? Or is this just too awful? And we decided that if we didn't do it, we, in the Me Too era, I can't say it, but we didn't have the intestinal fortitude to not do it.
Well, I'll say something about what Linkwood just said there. You know, I've written a lot of books, and I used to show my wife the manuscript. She used to read it and, you know, read parts of it. And finally she said, you know, I don't like this system. What I want is I want you to give me the book when it's published, and then I'll read it just like any other reader. And I said, okay, that's great. So I do that, and she reads my books, and how fast she reads them is really a sign of how good they are. She read this book in one day. I mean, she didn't even get out of bed. She was in bed the whole day. She read the book, and at the end of the day, she said, Doug, this is terrible. This is a terrible book. You and Lincoln have gone too far. You really went too far. When that event occurred, which we won't say what it is, but Link was just alluding to it, she said, I thought this is horrible. You just don't ever write another book like this. You went too far. And I said, but you finished the book, didn't you? And she said, well, yes, I couldn't stop reading it, but damn it, you went too far.
I have to say thank you, Christine. That's a very nice compliment.
Well, I mean, I asked the question because you've got multiple feet and multiple shoes, you know, so a classic murder mystery like a foot with a shoe is a lot different than, does it end up with 99? I think it's 99 shoes.
At the very end, it's 121 or something.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, anyway,
there's
a big difference between 1 and 100 and some, and so a classic murder is not going to be happening here. So a big question is not only who these feet belong to and what happened to them, but a really big question is where they come from. And I thought you guys did a terrific job with the science, helping us investigate where all these feet came from.
Well, we did a lot of research, and it turns out that you are all familiar with Flight 370, that strange Malaysian Airlines flight that disappeared. No one's ever found it. And pieces of that airliner washed up on Reunion Island and a few other areas in the Indian Ocean months later. And they did a massive and a very original computational job trying to reverse engineer the drift analysis of those pieces of the airplane, trying to figure out where they originated 5 months before, because that's when they were found. And so Lincoln and I did a huge amount. This was completely original research. No one had ever done anything like this before, but we found all these papers online and these drift analyses and everything. We realized, oh, this is perfect for our book, because these shoes all wash up on the beach, and they seem to have been in the water about three or 4 weeks. Is that right, Lincoln? Do I remember that?
Yeah, about 4 weeks.
From the amount of decay present of the flesh and the growth of marine organisms. So they have to. So we brought all this really cool science into doing a reverse drift analysis to where those shoes might have come from. Were they dumped in the ocean from a boat, or did they come from some island, or did they come from Cuba, or where did they come from? So it's a bit of a techno thriller in that way.
I'm sorry, I want to interject here, because as we were thinking about this, where could these feet have possibly come from that the reader couldn't guess in advance, getting back to that, he always being second guessed. And I suggested something to Doug, and he said, that's way out of line. That's totally impossible. It can't possibly even happen scientifically. And I said, that's why we have to make it happen. And Doug, to his credit, was able to solve the meteorological, and I won't say any more, problem of where the feet actually came from. And I don't think anyone's going to figure that out. And he really did a fantastic job, not only making the science understandable, but in working out this problem that the readers have no idea we were struggling with. Because, one thing that I think readers don't know is that how many ideas a writer has to go through before they come to the final one. And often with Doug and I, there are twice as many ideas, and I will say something and he'll shoot it down, or else he'll embroider it, I might say to Doug, what are we going to do in the next chapter? And Doug says, well, we haven't killed a dog in a while.
That was Lincoln who said that, not me.
But there's so many layers that go through before we get down to that thing. We could write 10 books, and if we kept all the stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor.
Well, that's really true, because the reader just sees the end product. They don't see all the different drafts and iterations and false starts and backups that go into it.
Lincoln said something that is really interesting about how our readers can figure out where we're going. The problem with us in particular is that we have exceptionally intelligent readers. I mean, their radar is out there, and they know, they figure stuff out. We don't know how they figure it out so quickly. So we have to, be smarter than they are, and that's really difficult because neither one of us are all that smart. We have very smart readers, so we really have to be careful and not assume that we're going to fool the reader. So hopefully this book really does fool the reader, but God knows we're probably going to get a bunch of emails saying, oh, I figured it out by page 20, you got it.
Too bad. But one of the reasons I brought it up was that this sounded, after Christine's comment, as though this is a book unrelievedly grim. But in point of fact, this whole thing about trying to figure out where the feet come from leads to there's just a great and ultimately fabulous and funny scene that involves the U.S. Coast Guard. So I've now discovered that Doug actually has creds in the Coast Guard Department, which is something about Doug I didn't know until today.
Well, that's true. I have a Coast Guard credential. I am a licensed OUPV sea captain. So it's so I know a lot about the Coast Guard and how
Can
they
you
work.
define what the initials mean for those of us who don't know?
Well, it's an operator of an uninspected vessel. It's the lowest form of a master's license or a sea captain's license. So I can take a vessel out on the sea under certain circumstances, and it can't be more than 65 feet long, and it's the lowest form of a captain's
Well,
license.
Even so, Doug, I hope you enjoy it because it's going to be rescinded incredibly fast once the Coast Guard reads.
I know, I feel really terrible.
Right, the Coast Guard will not love Doug as a consequence of this, but it's really very funny. So Doug, because of this, Doug is able to borrow Stuart Wood's yacht and sail it off the coast of Maine. So Doug has invited my husband and me to go to Maine, and if I can come and sail on Stuart Woods' yacht with you as captain, I'm definitely doing it.
Yes, Stuart doesn't even want to go on the boat with me. He says, take the boat out, go ahead. And,
Doug, tell them about the yacht. This is the Hinckley?
Oh my God, it's a Hinckley 44-foot
Tell them the readers
motor
about this.
yacht. Oh, it is the most amazing boat.
And if it's Stone Barrington, he has unrestrained sex with at least 3 people while he's on the voyage. But
God,
ours
I
is
don't
going
know,
to be a more sedate.
I missed that.
I
I had
know.
unrestrained sex on the yacht. It's
Too
always
bad.
been restrained. No.
Well, one of the conflict is one of the things that drives plot, right? Lincoln, you're an editor, and so to introduce extra conflict in this book, you guys made the Coast Guard guy in charge of the initial investigation. So you've now got different law enforcement agencies butting heads. You've got Pendergast with the FBI, you've got the Coast Guard, then you have the local sheriff. So you're ripe for jurisdictional disputes and a lot of kind of male chest thumping.
That's right. In a lot of cases like this, where there's a lot of jurisdictions. There's the Coast Guard, there's the local police, and the FBI, and so forth. They form what's known as a task force. So all these guys get together, and they're mostly guys, although some are women. In our book, there's some women as well. Get together, and then they all engage in macho posturing. Even the women do. Anyway, so it provided a very rich field of human interaction.
So Lincoln, explain to us the significance of the photograph on the postcard that all of you got with your copy of the book. What is it you are holding up?
Okay, I will tell you that. First, I wanted to mention one item of interest, which is that we in books like this, we often try and make Pendergast part of this a task force, or larger or smaller. Sometimes just a big bullying sheriff, because our readers love it when Pendergast drops an atomic bomb on this person or people later in the story and just level them, leave them speechless with his devastating threats and blackmail or whatever he might do. And we've gotten to the point where we try and tease the reader out, so they're never going to know exactly how far Pendergast's patience can be tested by this obnoxious, in this case, Coast Guard captain, before he drops the boom, as it were. But anyway, what was the question?
Right. This is how your plots diverge. But the question was, what's in the postcard for those of you who might...
Oh, yes, of course. I was at a restaurant here in Sarasota, and over the course of this book and one previous one, Pendergast has displayed an affinity for the local stone crabs, which are these crabs which, in the past anyway, the fishermen were only allowed to take off one claw and flip them back so they could defend themselves. While that claw was regrowing, so then it could be yanked off again. It's kind of a sounds like my life somehow. I don't quite know why, but Anyway, Pendergast has displayed a great affinity for stone crabs. And so I was in a restaurant in Sarasota, a seafood restaurant, and they had a few stone crabs. And I said, can I pose with these? And they said yes, after a couple of strange looks at me. And then I explained why, and the woman in charge said, it's too bad you're not going to be here tomorrow because we're getting a new order in. And, as it happened, as we were leaving, the stone crab burr came up in his van with two massive things of stone crabs. And, these things are really expensive. They go by claw size, small, large, massive. And massive is like $30-40 a pound. And, you pay for the shell, and the shell is like 3 times harder than a lobster shell. So it's, anyway, this was like, two gold bags, basically, of bullion. And I thought, wow, we're going to use this somehow for our book. And it was all in the name of sacrifice for the postcard that you all had.
I think you were fabulous. You might notice on the postcard that Julie of our staff created a special stamp, which the USPS will not recognize, but nonetheless is a really cool Florida stamp. And I haven't ever told you this story, but my husband, whose mother lived in Miami for a long time, absolutely was devoted to a restaurant called Joe Stone Crab House in Miami Beach. Many of you may know. So we were down there before we took off on some voyage or other to Barcelona. He dragged me to Joe's Stone Crab House and raved on and on about the crab, and he was so disappointed because the only thing I cared about at Joe's Stone Crab House was the key lime pie. I had one for an appetizer and one for dessert. So there you are. So maybe you can feature key lime pie in another book should you write another book in Florida. I guess it's not coincidental that these two books are in Florida since you're now living in Florida.
That was part of it, but it wasn't really our intention for this book to be set there. It was only because of the fact that Doug discovered fortuitously this fact about the feet washing up, and it seemed to us, what a perfect spot, Sanibel, which is a beautiful, beautiful island, and famous for its shelling. What worse place to have this happen? And also, we had all of our characters still down there. Cold Moon hadn't yet left for Colorado, and Pendergast was still there, and Smithback was writing his story, and so we thought we can just segue into this next story. And by the end of the book, as you'll see, they're not in Florida, but they're not back in New York either. So one thing we're discussing is exactly where they're going to end up in the follow-up book.
So the geography of Sanibel Island and Captiva, how many of you have read Randy Wayne White's books? Have any of you have? I've read them all, and they take place on Sanibel, most of them in that area in Captiva. So Doug, what's the special geography of the islands that made it especially good for this book?
Well, it has to do with the currents. The Sanibel and Captiva are famous for their shelling, which is a lot of shells wash up on the island. Every time there's a storm, there are new shells that wash up. So a lot of people go there, a lot of tourists, to wander the beach and pick up the shells.
But I was also thinking about the causeway because you could contain people since
Well,
the
that's right.
access is so limited.
Right, there's very limited access. There's a causeway going from the mainland to Sanibel Island, and then a little bridge, one little bridge going off a blind pass, which is an inlet that takes you to Captiva Island. So if you're on Captiva Island, it's hell to get anywhere. You have to get off. You have to cross these bridges, and so that creates difficulties and complications in the novel. But it also creates a situation where the police can shut down these islands in order to conduct their investigation, and it creates, Smithback has to figure out a way to get on the island, and evade the police, and it creates a lot of fun problems that need to be solved. It creates an interesting setting for the novel.
So it's kind of
And
an
you know, in
update of Agatha
earlier
Christie.
years, there was no bridge at all. There was no long causeway, and that just made it that much more remote. And you know, there are still a few islands in Florida that have that Sanibel feeling, where it's not commercialized and the buildings aren't tall, and there are plenty of nature preserves. And it's because they were really protected from commercialization for such a long time.
It is kind of an Agatha Christie thing, though, if you think about it. And then there were none, except that the object is different. It's not to kill all the people on the island. It's to. We've already said it wasn't going to be a conventional murder mystery, but it does create some interesting access problems. And Smithback, in particular, this is Roger Smithback, brother of the now dead William Smithback, correct? Writing for the Miami Herald, who has to figure out how he can try to get a story.
Yeah, and he's a journalist. He's got all kinds of ways to get the story that aren't totally kosher.
Have you no remorse about killing off his brother?
Oh, we feel terrible remorse. It was a terrible thing that happened. Lincoln, why did you do that?
I will say that I was a prime mover in advocating for that, but nevertheless, I remember when Doug was one speculating, maybe we had to kill off Pendergast. Wouldn't that be unexpected? Remember that?
That's a colony. That's a libel.
He's gonna say it's a lie, but I swear to God. Anyway, we killed. We caused Pendergast to no longer exist in the book because we wanted to show that, for two reasons. One, we wanted to show that nobody was safe in our books at all. I mean, if this guy had been there since the very first book, since Relic, and he was a good buddy of half the people in our ensemble cast, and if he died, who was safe? And Doug said, let's have an autopsy and show his brain being taken out and running the guts so that, there's absolutely no way people think he's going to come back later on. And we did feel kind of bad about it, because we gave him some of our best lines. And having a journalist around is really a great foil for us as a subplot. He could do a lot of the digging that our main characters can't, or he can get it in trouble, so we thought, let's bring in Roger Smith back. And one of the most enjoyable things Doug and I had to do was figure out what ways Roger was like his brother and how he was different, because we didn't want just a clone. And so we tried to show how he was different, not tell how he was different.
Yeah, how is he different, Link? What is the number one way he's different?
I think the number one way he's different is he's less impulsive. I think Roger's more like me, and Bill is more like you. I mean, you would rush right ahead into something without thinking about the danger, and I would stay back and read about it for a while. And he's a mathematician. He was into game theory, but we fashioned it so that the Smithback's father ran a newspaper. And that's why both our children became journalists when they grew up.
So we've talked about Smithback. Tell us more about Constance, because Constance has quite a role in this book, and actually a whole sort of separate plot of her own.
Well, she does. Constance comes down to Florida with Pendergast, and they are on vacation. And then Pendergast is called into this case, and Constance is really pissed off about that. She does not want to get involved in another case. She wanted to have this vacation with Pendergast. So she's a disgruntled and reluctant person in this novel. And Constance has a very deep fear of the water, of the ocean, and she's especially horrified at these feet washing up. So she doesn't want anything to do with a case. So she finds herself with Pendergast in this drafty Victorian house on Captiva Island, the original house on the island, and with nothing to do, except it turns out that this house has a ghost story attached to it. And so Constance says, I'm going to investigate this ghost story. I'm going to talk to old timers and find out about the ghost story and kind of look into that and see what that's all about. And she does. And that becomes a very interesting subplot to the book.
I have to thank Doug because I feel like he indulges me by letting me have Constance in these books because she's a very unusual character in a lot of ways. And sometimes I go overboard with what she does, at least my suggestion for what she should do. And in this book, Doug and I spent a long time taking my suggestion for the final act involving Constance and whittling it down, until what she was doing was at least had a vestige of believability to it.
Boy, that's a role reversal since you started out as Doug's editor and now he's turning the tables on you.
Well, we do it to each other, and we get our pet ideas, and we get attached to them, and that's one thing that's very good because the other one knows when we're over the top and can kind of smack us down and show us what's true.
Lincoln is very attached to Constance. Sometimes too attached. It's a little weird.
So we probably said all we need to say about Crooked River. So give us an update, Lincoln. What are you writing on your own? Because you've written some really excellent books yourself in the last few years.
Thank you. I'm always afraid to say what it's about, but I will say that it is. It stars Jeremy Logan, as my previous books have, who was the enigmologist. In this case, I've always tried to place him in settings that are very, very strange and cool and often claustrophobic, like this facility deep below the water, or this place, way up in the Arctic tundra. In this case, he's in a large, unusual laboratory way off in the woods, and it involves, again, I shouldn't even say it, but involves the next stage of virtual reality. In my book, Deathmatch, I envisioned a computer being used for a dating service. A computer, a supercomputer with many, many gigaflops of memory being able to process gigabytes of information and find the perfect match. And of course, now that's old hat, that's passé. But it wasn't, 40 years ago when I wrote the book, or whatever it was. And that's what I'm trying to do with VR right now, is to try and think of how that'll be in 5 years and write a thriller around that. So that's what I do in my spare time, which is not that often.
So, Doug, what's going on with Nora Kelly? Because Old Bones was such a terrific series start last August. I hope most of you have read it by now, because it's really, I think, a terrific book.
How many of you have read Old Bones? Good. Well, that's a great... Yeah, somehow that book really... Lincoln and I had so much fun writing that book, if you can call that fun. But, cannibalism and all the rest of it, that's fun and not really fun. But anyway, so we have a new book, and the title is Scorpion's Tale. And it involves, Corey is now a junior FBI agent in the Albuquerque office, and Nora is an archaeologist with the Santa Fe Archaeological Institute, and a body is found off in the middle of nowhere. It might be about 70 years old. It might be a homicide. It's on federal land. And so Corey is given this case because it doesn't look important. She's just a junior FBI agent, and Nora is brought in to excavate the body to make sure that, and boy, do they stumble over something really unbelievable and incredible. And so that's really how that novel starts.
So that'll be next, and then another Pendergast. Is that the general plan?
Yeah, Lincoln and I'm going to fly to Florida tomorrow and get together with Lincoln. We're going to drive around Florida and do some book signings, and we're going to talk about the next Pendergast novel. Lincoln tells me he has some good ideas.
I do, but you're not going to hear them. I wanted to add to what Doug said about Old Bones and Scorpion's Tail is that the books are nominally called Nora Kelly and Corey Swanson books, and I more or less am a champion of Nora Kelly because I really enjoyed her role in Thunderhead, and some of the Pendergast books have followed that, and Doug is really likes Corey, I know, as a character. And so it'll be interesting to see who emerges as the dominant character in this series. You know, I thought for a while it would be Nora, but I don't know. Corey has an awful lot going for her. She has this backstory of a young FBI agent, and she can go anywhere with these cases. And so I'm kind of worried that it's going to become a Corey Swanson and Nora Kelly novel pretty soon. It'll be like Preston and Child all over again. I don't know if I can take another thing like that.
Wow, it's that whole jurisdictional thing coming into play here with the authors. I love it.
Lincoln, I didn't know you felt that way.
Right. So, Doug, one of your
Well,
most... I'm sorry, Lincoln, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to segue back to Doug and The Lost City of the Monkey God, because that's the last nonfiction book that you wrote, which was terrific. What's going on with it? It still appears to be selling enormously.
Yeah, that book just seems to just sell and sell. I guess people are telling their friends about it or something, but it does seem to keep going. My publisher is very happy.
It's a fabulous book, and I was telling Doug, my husband and I were idly watching something the other night, so we tuned into the second Jack Ryan series. I don't know if any of you have watched it. And they're using flash LiDAR to locate the mining, the mineral in Venezuela. But Doug's, in Lost City, the Monkey God, LiDAR was the thing that allowed penetrating the foliage of the jungle to find, or to map out where this city might be. So what's going on with LiDAR? Is it becoming a dominant new technology?
Well, it is. It's actually, they're doing LiDAR all over the place, including here in Arizona. They're using LiDAR to map a lot of Indian ruins here in Arizona. Huge. A lot of LiDAR being done. But the main use of LiDAR now, and it's now being used right now, it's not a future technology, are in self-driving cars. LiDAR is far superior to radar. It has higher resolution, it's faster, and it is so that right now the self-driving cars are using LiDAR primarily as a way to survey the environment around them and to see what's happening. So.
What is LiDAR? Oh, you want to explain it for those who
LiDAR
don't know?
is it's a radar. It uses longer wavelength electromagnetic radiation. LiDAR uses light. It actually uses infrared laser light, and it shoots the laser out, and the light bounces off and comes back, and the time it takes indicates the distance. And it's a harmless laser. It's not visible to the naked eye. It doesn't affect anything. But it's because it's a shorter wavelength, it has a much higher resolution. And
Yeah, LiDAR is like radar, but it has fewer calories.
very witty. It's a good one.
Well, I mean, it's really amazing stuff because it can map its way through foliage, it can map its way through dirt. So, I think it can be potentially a great tool for shipwrecks. And, they might eventually find the Malaysian Flight 370 if they can. But I don't know whether it can penetrate that depth in the ocean is the big problem.
Well, they use a green light for LiDAR underwater, but it can only go about 40 feet.
Right, so it's not probably going to be that helpful in ever finding the plane. But, and I don't know whether the Jack Ryan thing, after all, it's fiction. One of the reasons it's fiction is Tom Clancy is an executive producer, so right there you know that it's really fiction. Because he's been dead for I don't remember how many years. But the object is to find a crucial mineral deposit under the ground in Venezuela. So can it do that?
No, that's totally
Or
unscientific.
that's just a
Yeah.
fictional.
LiDAR doesn't penetrate the ground, or it doesn't really penetrate anything, except the green LiDAR will penetrate water. But if you really want to penetrate the ground, you have to use, radar will penetrate dry sand, for example, but
Yeah.
LiDAR doesn't penetrate anything.
So when you were in Honduras looking for the city, did it work because of the gaps in the foliage? It was able
That's
to
right.
penetrate that.
Yeah, they fly a plane over the jungle, and they literally fire billions of laser pulses down into the jungle canopy and measure the bounce backs. Now the LiDAR bounces back even off the thinnest leaf, but even in the thickest jungle, if you lie down on your back and look up, you'll see bits and pieces of blue sky. And because the LiDAR coverage is so comprehensive, these billions and billions of pulses, some of those pulses go through these gaps and bounce back up again. So what they get is a point cloud, which are billions of pixels, of points, of reflections. And then they take a very powerful computer and remove all the reflections from the canopy, just looking at the reflections from the ground. And that's how they map the ground, even in the thickest jungle.
So Lincoln, do you leave the technical stuff largely up to Douglas?
I was just thinking, this is the kind of conversation I have to look forward to driving across borders.
Okay, we gave you a preview tonight. It's
Well,
not.
Nathan, you ain't seen nothing yet. I'm going to talk to you about cryptanalysis. That's important.
Oh. So what's your special expertise you bring to the books, Lincoln? Besides being a smartass, which is obviously one of your strengths.
I used to say that it was computer science, and it was horror, and Doug likes to say that I write all the scenes written by the crazy sadistic murderers. But it's harder to say as the years go on. I could really go on answering this question for about 2 minutes, but I don't really know the answer, and I'm going to have to think about that, Barbara. Because it's really changed a lot over the years, and I think it's the fact that the way Doug and I have written together has changed, and I think I bring a certain incisiveness to the books. I bring some humor to the books, and in fact, Doug spent a fair amount of time taking out humor that is inappropriate.
Very inappropriate humor. Lincoln puts these things in just to get me upset, and so I have to take them out. It's bait.
So people are always interested in how the two of you write together. Has that changes in technology, changed your collaborative style? I mean, did you once upon a time actually trade paper, and now you can do it all?
We now know how much each other is working because I can see on Dropbox what he's doing, and he can do the same for me. We used to just have to use track changes, but now we've got it down to a science. So I know when he's napping off or something,
So when you're using Dropbox, you can write right over each other?
No, we've got a very complicated system, a Byzantine system, by which we take separate files, because as you probably know, we divide the book up generally by either by subplot or sequence or character, or else we just take a huge bolus of chapters and assign them to each other in a way that Doug will write the chapters that he's more comfortable with, and I'll write the chapters that seem, more appropriate to my taste or my ability. And then we keep separate documents, except the few times that Dropbox crashes and we get these conflicted copies. But we've been very lucky because, the first couple of books we wrote, we had to fax stuff back and forth. And that was no fun.
Well, I think we could take questions from the audience, right? Any of you, Doug, you want to take over here? Because you can call on people.
Questions, anybody? Yes.
Do you have any plans for the elusive brother? Pendergast's elusive brother Diogenes.
Diogenes. Well, the last we saw of Diogenes was, how many of you read the short story? Not too many. You know, everyone who is a subscriber to our newsletter gets that short story for free.
Wait, Doug, how many people have not read the short story?
Yeah, how many people have not read the short story?
Is it a lot?
Okay. All right. Well, subscribe to the news. What?
Oh no! Uh-oh, Lincoln is disappointed. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. It wrecked all our plans for the new book. Oh my!
Well, you should. Well,
No, I'm kidding.
how many of you do not subscribe to our newsletter? Okay, well, you should subscribe because you will get a notice and we will send you a free Pendergast short story that's really cool, and it does involve Diogenes. And that's where you will find out what might be happening next. So, I don't want to spoil that short story though, since a lot of you haven't read it. So. And any other questions? Yes.
When are we going to hear more about the child of Constance and Diogenes?
When are we going to hear more about the child of Constance and Diogenes? Lincoln, would you like to take that one?
No. That is a very difficult point. You know, Doug and I have written ourselves into 2 or 3 corners. Not only with, I don't mind. You know, we can talk about this here. You know, since you've come to this event, we might as well, you know, give you some spoilers. But you know, look at, for example, Pendergast's son, younger son, or Constance's child, or Diogenes, or Viola Mascaline. There are all these characters wandering around with unfulfilled lives, you know, that Pendergast is ignoring. And in the case of Constance's child, we've given, I think, him a really good backstory, or at least a really good excuse why he has to stay in Tibet for a long time. So, you know, if Pendergast gets another 15 years older, and I can see that kid coming in and helping him with Diogenes, but I think he's probably going to be studying his texts, sacred texts in Tibet for a while longer. Wouldn't you say, Doug?
I think so. All right, next question. Yes.
2 questions, really. Just wondering how you're, have you really shaken off your parasitic disease for good? And secondly, are you feeling kind of pressured about the coronavirus?
Have I shaken off my disease, and do I feel pressured about the coronavirus? Yeah. Well, I'm you know, my leishmaniasis is not too infectious as long as you stay back 15 feet. You're okay. No, it's good. I'm fine. Everything's great. It's also not infectious at all. It's but as far as coronavirus goes, this is a really crazy thing that's happening, and it looks like that virus has escaped, and it's now going to be, you know, in the human species indefinitely. He's probably putting on his face mask. Anyway, it's coronavirus is really it's really a bad deal. It may be that we can get the flu, we can get common colds, and then there's a coronavirus season, and we're all going to be seeing that from now on.
Depressing thought.
Well, I just read that actually today, and there's Lincoln. Where's your face mask?
Well, I don't have a face mask on, but because I'm be traveling across Florida with you, I do have a box here, 3M.
Is that a rest? What is that?
Just to be safe, leishmaniasis, you can't be too careful, because until Doug's nose falls off before I have long trips in the car with, no air circulation.
I think that's a definite improvement. It looks so much better.
Thank you very much.
Why would you ever take that off?
Believe me, I'm not going to. But I am selling these, by the way, in case anybody wants to buy it.
He's hoarding them. He expects the price to
I
rise.
bought about 10 boxes of these things for SARS, and nothing ever happened. And my wife laughed at me, and I tossed a bunch away. And now I've got this is all I have left. So, we'll see
You
what
actually
happens.
moved them from New Jersey to Florida?
Yes.
Boy, a hoarder right there.
There are a lot of diseases in Florida, though. Watch out.
There are. Yeah.
Including the one that gave you leash. If global warming continues, it's walking its way towards North America, isn't it? Yeah, scary thought. So, anybody else? Yes.
How much time do you spend actually researching the technical aspects of your books versus just letting the fiction take over?
How much time do we spend researching the technical aspects of our books, as opposed to just letting the fiction take over? Link, do you want to tackle that one?
Well, thank you very much. I'd love to. That's a very interesting question, actually. And, Doug and I try to write books. Obviously, they're mostly on technical subjects, but we try to write books on subjects that interest us. Either we know a fair amount about it, or we like to learn about it, because that way readers can learn along with us. And as well as enjoy, hopefully, the storyline. And I think what tends to happen is, in this way, Crooked River is a good example, because you have to learn a fair amount of a way currents work and how tides work, as well as how boats work. There's some scenes that take place on cigarette boats, which are the old speedboats that used to run cigarettes in and booze. From Havana during Prohibition, and shaped like cigarettes, hence the name, very, very fast. So there's a lot of technical details about meteorology and diseases that partly is interesting just in and of itself to us. And also, if you build the story properly, you can, you don't just give an info dump, of this stuff for 3 or 4 pages. You can make it interesting to readers too. And what we like to do is build a technical foundation. It's very solid, because once that technical foundation is there, we will have the readers, hopefully, disbelief suspended, and then we can go into the action and the over-the-top scenes, and we'll have them writing along with us.
Questions? No other questions?
I think we've counted them all the way around. So, one more.
There.
I'm sure I speak for everyone here that we'd like to hear Lincoln play some of that banjo.
Oh, well, you know what? Maybe I will this time. Hold on.
All right.
Yeah.
It's really scary the way he just disappears, isn't it? Comes back. While he's gone, I will mention that Doug and I recorded a podcast over a drink earlier this evening, which we talked about some different stuff. So you can find it on iTunes or on our website. Patrick, it's on your desk in my iPad.
There you go.
I am going to play a very small little bit in honor of the fact that the last 2 books have taken place in the Florida swamps, and I hope everybody will recognize what this is from. Thank you.
Well, we definitely can't top that. So I think we're going to say thank you, Lincoln, for joining us. It's been an absolute treat, as always. And I am thinking seriously of coming to Florida and driving you out here. Just once.
Please do.
Oh ho! Listen to that. All right.
We'll make this a book party, a book launch party. You come out here, Lincoln, and you can stop by Santa Fe on your way out, and we'll have a good time. It'll be fun.
It will be. We'd love to see you in person. Oh, look at that! Wow, you're really coming along with that technology. That's so impressive. Anyway, thank you so much. Have a stone crab for me, for Rob rather, and lime pie for me.
Before I leave, I want to say one more thing, and that is people often ask us who our favorite contemporary thriller writers are, and one of them is a fellow named Martin Cruz Smith. And in the chapter where the first autopsy takes place of the feet, we have an homage to a memorable scene he wrote in his book Polar Star. And we wanted to give him credit for that and for being an inspiration to us. And I also want to thank all of you. I know some of you have come a long way, and to see Doug and why you did that instead of coming to see me. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate your interest, and we couldn't be writing these books without you and without Barbara to support us and to curate these events. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go away, I love that. Have you let Martin know that? Have you?
We don't know him at all.
Well,
so-
I do, so I will email him. His actual name is Bill. Yep. He signed his last book for us. He doesn't do it anymore because he has Parkinson's and he doesn't travel anymore. But he was here for many years, and I will let him know because I'm sure he'll be
good.
extremely pleased
Good.
to hear that. I think it's really cool. So while Patrick needs to disassemble this stuff for just a moment. But our plan is for, once he does that, we're going to put the screen up and you guys can stand up and move your chairs against the wall. But just hang on for a minute till, stay seated a second since we don't want anybody to fall. And then Doug will, Doug, you want to sign at that table so you'll be at picture taking height if we move it back?
Sure, whatever you think.
Well,
that'd be
it's
good.
easier because then you're at a photo height, and
That's
then you
better.
don't have to
That's
get
right.
up and down all the
That's a
time.
good-
So we'll move the little glass table back here behind the screen as soon as we raise it up. While you're sitting, I have some good news. We've trained you all to come early and eat all around us because there's not enough parking, as you all know, and we can't have a cafe. But right behind the bookstore,